Climate change. It's all around us. From the Arctic Circle to the coasts of Africa, we see climate change every day. What is viewed as a hoax by some is a threat to many. Is climate change caused by human activity? In order to answer that, we must first answer, what is climate change?
Climate change as we know it today is characterized by an abrupt increase in the Earth's temperature. It is estimated to have gotten 1.2 to 1.4 degrees Fahrenheit warmer in just the last century. 10 out of the last 13 years were the warmest on record.
Climate change has also resulted in a 17-centimeter rise in sea level over the past century, longer wildfire seasons, deeper droughts, and natural disasters that are more dangerous and destructive than ever before. But are these changes natural? The fluctuation of the climate cycle indicates that natural factors contribute to current climate change. These natural drivers include the intensity of the sunlight, periodic volcanic eruptions that eject tiny particles known as aerosols, and natural carbon cycle processes such as termite mounds that emit methane. However, according to the UCS, these natural changes alone can't explain the temperature changes we've seen. The models that depict solely natural influences do not accurately portray the observed warming of the past 50 years. Only a combination of both human and natural environmental factors can correlate to the dramatic trends in climate change today.
Based upon all available, reliable, consistent scientific kind of work on climate change that goes back more than 2 decades now, climate change is an actual phenomenon. And when I say climate change, I want to be clear that what the scientific community is saying is that climate change as being driven by human activity. So this is not necessarily...
The Environmental Protection Agency claims that over the past century, human activities have released large amounts of carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. However, the buildup of greenhouse gases can change Earth's climate and result in dangerous effects to human health and welfare and to ecosystems. Human expansion of the greenhouse effect is the largest contributor to climate change. Burning fossil fuels, deforestation, and industrial processes all emit gases into the atmosphere that trap energy, causing the planet to warm.
Well, I'm not a big believer in man-made climate change. There could be some impact, but I don't believe it's a devastating impact.
We have virtually an entire political party that is rejecting basic science. And the science is no longer in doubt. Some 97% of scientists who have written in peer-reviewed journals say the following: climate change is real. It is significantly caused by human activity.
There's that Gallup poll that came out last month, which found 1 in 4 Americans is skeptical of all the effects of climate change and thinks this issue's been exaggerated.
Because the media has told the nation over and over again, day after day, for 20 years, that the oceans are rising, the polar bears are dying, the sea, the ice is melting, that storms are going to sweep the earth, and that we're all going to die of a heat wave. I mean, this is an incredible, bad science.
What's your data to the contrary?
Despite vast national attention and concern to climate change, there are many who deny its existence. Those opposed to climate change have many reasons, one of which they cite is the lack of information and data historically. Although the Earth has been studied since the Renaissance, global warming wasn't identified until 1979. This argument states that there is no strong record of climate change in the past, so there is no way to predict the future. Another argument used by those opposed to climate change is that the satellites that measure the data are inaccurate and dysfunctional. Yet another argument used is that climate change is partisan and was created by Democrats in order to raise energy bills and produce more reliance of the people on the government. It is also argued that climate change exists but isn't man-made. In fact, it's just a climate cycle. This is backed up by the growing ice in the South Pole, phenomenon such as El Niño, and cooling in parts of the Earth.
Climate change deniers say that there is not significant historical backing. The earliest scientific recognition of climate change was actually in 1859. According to the American Institute of Physics, it was then when physicist John Tyndall discovered that some gases block infrared radiation. Due to these findings, he suggested that changes in the concentration of gases could bring climate change. Not only that, but the connection between human activity and its impact on climate change was noted by savant Arrhenius. In 1896, he published the first calculation of global warming from human emissions of carbon dioxide. Additionally, climate change has been recognized on an international scale since 1979 with the First World Climate Conference. This was the first time climate change and man's role in it influenced major global action. It laid the foundation for the subcommittee of the United Nations Environment Program, the International Panel on Climate Change, in 1988. Based on additional data from this committee, the Rio Summit was held in 1992. There, the United Nations Framework on Climate Change was signed. As stated by the Center for Climate Change and Energy Solutions, the convention established a long-term objective of stabilizing greenhouse gas concentrations in the atmosphere at a level that would prevent dangerous anthropologic interference with the climate system. It also set a voluntary goal of reducing emissions from developed countries to 1990 levels by 2000, a goal that most countries did not meet. Currently, 191 parties, including the U.S., have ratified the UNFCCC. This brings us to modern times and current policies.
Are there any policies that are in place to combat climate change as of right now?
There are a mix. I mean, it varies a lot geographically. So there are some countries and regions that have been more progressive. And when I say progressive, I mean they basically have been more active in trying to address climate change. Okay. That came out of the Kyoto Protocol of 1997, which was the first meeting that set kind of basically targets to mitigate the emission of greenhouse gases. Some countries signed on to that. Some countries attempted to meet those particular goals. The United States was not one of them. Okay. That having been said, within the United States, there are examples of more local attempts to combat climate change. Some of those are at the city level. Okay. So there's examples of cities that have themselves set kind of targets to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. There's also states as well. California, for example, has been more active in trying to engage in climate change policy than other states.
Globally, whose responsibility is it to combat climate change?
He's got the whole world in his hands. He's got the whole wide world in his hands. He's got the whole world in his hands. He's got the